समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
12 men, 5 of them on death row for years, walked free this week, completely discharged of allegations that they played a critical role in the 7/11 bombings of Mumbai's suburban trains, which claimed 209 lives in 2006. Even though the state government is appealing the acquittals, police, politicians and intelligence officials have known for decades that the 12 convicted men had nothing to do with the bombings. The deaths in those bombings were far greater than on 26/11. But the greatest irony of all is that the real perpetrators might be in plain view and immune from prosecution. This is a national police scandal with few parallels. I'll be unpacking how it came about in this episode of the Print Security Code. The men gathered early one morning in a one-room tenement inside the Deccan Cooperative Society in Savory, on the grimy eastern fringes of suburban Mumbai. They began packing ammonium nitrate and fuel oil gel, the lethal but readily available commercial explosive used across India, in 35-kilogram pressure cookers. Then, a detonator cap was loaded into each pressure cooker and linked to a simple Ajanta brand digital clock set to 6:30 p.m. Each cooker was then packed in a shopping bag. Later that evening, on the 11th of July 2006, 209 people died, far more than on 26/11, when the bombs went off in packed first-class compartments on 7 separate trains running from Churchgate. This week, 19 years after that day, the Bombay High Court has finally held what successive governments, police service and the intelligence services themselves have known for years. The 5 men sent to death row for their role in the bombings and the 7 others given shorter sentences had absolutely nothing to do with that terrorist attack. The Maharashtra government has announced it will appeal the High Court judgment, but it's possible disturbing evidence will surface that the botched trial actually enabled the terrorists who were in fact responsible for the crime. To understand what happened and why, you have to go back to the time. Intelligence and police services were struggling to detect the real workings of the Lashkar-e-Taiba linked network that later came to be known as the Indian Mujahedin. Therefore, following the 7/11 train bombings, the usual suspects, generally men with some loose ties to conservative Muslim groups or known criminals, were pulled in and charged with terrorism, as was the pattern in several prosecutions from that period. Following the bombing of the Sankat Mochan temple in Varanasi, as well as the local railway station, the imam of the mosque at Phulpur was arrested and charged with the murder of 28 people. The Uttar Pradesh police alleged that Waliullah had handed over the explosives and the pressure cooker case to 3 terrorists from Bangladesh who were never identified. The imam was sentenced to 10 years in prison for possession of an assault rifle and grenades, and in 2022 he was sentenced to death for his alleged role in the bombing. But for all these arrests, the bombings and the arrests went on. Following bombings at Sarojini Nagar, Govindpuri and Paharganj in October 2009, just one day before Diwali, Srinagar resident Mohammad Hussain Fazili was charged with organizing the terrorist attacks. Together with his friend Mohammad Rafiq Shah, Fazili was later acquitted of all charges. A third man who had been arrested, Tariq Dar, was convicted of charges related to supporting terrorism but cleared of any role in the actual bombing attack. 5 years ago, a Bombay court finally sentenced Kamal Ansari, Faisal Sheikh, Ehtesham Siddiqui, Naveed Khan and Asif Khan to death for their role in the train blasts. 7 other conspirators were handed down life sentences. Just one of the alleged perpetrators, Wahid Sheikh, was acquitted. For the hundreds of families torn apart by one of the world's most savage acts of mass casualty terrorism, the law seemed to have finally brought justice and maybe some closure. There were strange elements in the prosecution story, though, which began to surface on the margins of the media reportage. The police claimed that the bombers had each been accompanied by Pakistani accomplices, a mysterious Bollywoodish touch never seen in past terrorist attacks. One Pakistani terrorist was actually shot dead in Mumbai's Antop Hill, but his ties to the case, whatever they were supposed to have been, never surfaced in the trial. And then there were the common sense rooms. The safety room where the explosives were assembled, according to the police, barely had space to seat 4 people, let alone the team of 8 men purported to have made bombs there with big pressure cookers, the journalist Sagar Rajput first reported. The questions turned to embarrassment in November 2007. Newsrooms across the country began receiving emails from an organization calling itself the Indian Mujahedin. It was just a term it used to distinguish itself from Pakistani groups rather than a brand in itself. The emails were often sent seconds before terrorist attacks. And the first email claimed responsibility for earlier attacks, including Varanasi in 2006, Hyderabad in August 2007, and of course, the train bombings. Each of these emails cast the actions of the perpetrators as revenge for the 2002 communal massacre in Gujarat. The email issued after the Ahmedabad bombing of 26 July 2008, for example, said that the Indian Mujahedin was, I quote, raising the illustrious banner of jihad against the Hindus and all those who fight and resist us. But the mails also insisted the men in jail were innocent. A lot of people at the time didn't listen. But now we know that was correct. Faking it, it has to be said, isn't a unique talent of the Indian police. The usual suspects were also lined up in London after bombs went off at the Horse and Groom, 7 Stars and the King's Arms pubs. Paul Hill, one of the accused, was identified by a British Army intelligence officer in Belfast who noticed he had shoulder-length fair hair. The photograph the officer was looking at, though, was of 2 women survivors, not a perpetrator. That didn't stop Paul Hill from being locked up. Jerry Conlon was picked up based on past suspicion that he had ties to the Irish Republican Army, which had never been proven. Patrick Armstrong and his girlfriend Carol Richardson seem to have been arrested basically because they were Irish and living in squats. Justice John Donaldson declared at sentencing, I quote, "The English language is rich in words, but no single one can adequately describe your crime." Great, but there was one he didn't consider, which was innocent. There were no worthwhile forensics, alibis were ignored, and credible claims of torture in that case were dismissed. Later, when the Guildford Four had become middle-aged, an official investigation conducted by the British Parliament itself would conclude, I quote, "The material then in the possession of the Crown, including such explanations as the police officers concerned were then prepared to offer, cast such a real doubt upon the reliability and veracity of the evidence upon which the prosecution was founded that it should be inevitable that the convictions were regarded as unsafe." In other words, the whole story was a lie. The first challenge to the 7/11 case actually came from deep inside the Indian police system, when investigators at the Andhra Pradesh's counter-terrorism unit, which was then called Octopus, decided to conduct a careful forensic analysis of the evidence. Each of the bombs, investigators concluded in a document available with ThePrint, used identical bomb-making techniques and materials, fitting a Samay brand electrical cock boosted with a 9-volt battery. As a practice, the Andhra Pradesh investigators noted, they used red, yellow, brown wires for the positive wires and the white, black wires for the negative terminal. Now, why is this important? Well, a bomb maker, like all of us, learns techniques which, if successful, he or she uses again and again to avoid making mistakes. Every bomb maker thus has a very distinctive signature. The Indian Mujahedin only once experimented with an alternate timer using electrically erasable programmable read-only memory. For 27 improvised explosive devices they planted in Surat on the 26th of July 2008. The bombs fizzled and the bomb maker went back to doing things the old way. Later, in 2008, the Delhi police, acting on information provided by the Intelligence Bureau, stumbled into an apartment in Batla House, which housed the Indian Mujahedin's co-founder Atif Amin. Amin was killed in the shootout together with Delhi police officer Mohan Chand Sharma. The top leadership of the Indian Mujahedin fled to Karachi after the raids which followed, and then to the Islamic State in Syria, where the Bombay perpetrators Muhammad Sajid, Abu Rashid Ahmad and Shahnawaz Alam are believed to have died in combat. Before their death, however, the men released a videotape claiming responsibility for their attacks, including the 7/11 train bombings, and warning of more. In the early 2010s, led by then Superintendents of Police Vikas Vaibhav and Swayam Prakash Pani, the National Investigation Agency began a comprehensive investigation into the Indian Mujahedin's genesis and later metastasis. The inquiry focused on how a small group of Islamist youth activists from Azamgarh in North India, in Uttar Pradesh, and Bhatkal in Karnataka broke away from the Students' Islamic Movement of India, or SIMI, then turned to organized crime groups to secure training and resources from the Lashkar-e-Taiba. The NIA didn't investigate the Mumbai case since that was already under trial. In its 2014 charge sheet, though, the NIA asserted in a separate case that, I quote, the accused Asadullah Akhtar was aware of the participation of the members of his group in the Indian Mujahedin in the blasts at Sarojini Nagar, Delhi in 2005, Mumbai train blasts in 2006, Gorakhpur blasts in 2007, and UP court blasts in 2007. The Mumbai train blasts, and I'm quoting according to the NIA charge sheet, were carried out by Indian Mujahedin operatives, including but not limited to Sadiq Sheikh, Bada Sajid, which is a nickname for Muhammad Sajid, Atif Amin, and Abu Rashid. For its part, Maharashtra's crime branch had also filed a charge sheet on the 7/11 bombings based on alleged Indian Mujahedin member Sadiq Israr Sheikh's confession. That charge sheet remains sealed though and has never been heard in a court. A one-time air conditioning mechanic from Mumbai's Cheetah camp, Sheikh said that the Gujarat pogroms radicalized him. In search of vengeance, he sought out a relative with crime world contacts, Salim Azmi. Azmi, according to the confession, introduced him to the gang lord Asif Reza Khan, who was sending the first Indian Mujahedin cadre to Pakistan. Later, in a separate confession to the Gujarat police, which according to Indian law cannot be used for the purposes of his trial, Sheikh provided a very graphic account of what happened in 7/11. I quote, I would go first with one bag to Churchgate, then keep the bag in the first class compartment. I would get down at Marine Line Station and then go back to Churchgate. Next, Atif would leave with 2 bags and also return to Churchgate. Abu Rashid and Sajid would take 1 bag each and keep the bags in the selected train. Finally, Shahnawaz came to Churchgate with 2 bags and we put both of them on the trains. In April 2013, Sheikh appeared before the court, summoned by defense witnesses who hoped he would tell the same story about 7/11. He denied knowing the perpetrators. Why should he confess? And claimed that the crime branch had tortured him into confessing his role in the bombings. The story you say was given to you by the crime branch, a defense lawyer suggested to him, was not in fact a story, but the factual position about the 7/11 railway blasts. Sheikh did not lie. I do not want to answer this question, he said. Today, all these years on, and these scandalous acquittals later, it's time somebody does answer that question. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor with ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.